Um, my father said my name. In English, my name is Samuel David. So, greetings. It is an honor to be here. We'd like to start off where I come from. We come from many cultures, and we are we have a lot of protocols for our royalty. We have a certain way that we treat our kings, and there is no king greater than our king, the king who rules Jerusalem. Amen. So first, we would like to start off with what we call a haka, a war chant. This is based on Psalm 24 about the Lord of hosts. Lord of hosts, we greet you tonight. You alone are the King of glory. To you be all glory, praise, honor, riches, wealth, power, the kingdom forever and ever and ever. Amen. So this haka, it talks about who's in the front, who's right in the front in the battle, killing. And then the reply comes, it's the chief warrior. So then the answer comes, so who is the chief warrior? And then the answer comes, it is the King of glory. And so then we ask, who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty. The Lord mighty in battle. He is the King of glory. So if we could do that now, that would be good. Alléluia. hosts. He is the King of glory. Amen. Give praise to the Lord. Praise his name. Lord, you are holy. You are great. There is no God like you. Only you could do what you are doing now. You are the King of glory. Amen. And now from my islands. Afio maila wa fionga. Le tupu a tupu maleali ioli. Royal greetings to your holy majesty, the King of kings and the Lord of lords. Tulona ala wa fionga leali ioau. Greetings to your majesty, the Lord of hosts. Tulona oilalangi. Greetings to you, hosts of heaven. Tulona oi lelalangi. Greetings to you, nations of the earth. Tulona oi leulumatua. Greetings to you, the firstborn, Israel. Tulona levaatau o leli ioau. Greetings to the Pacific, the war vessel of the Lord of hosts. Mua, mua, mua in the mua, muau. Mua, mua, mua in the mua, muau. Mua, mua, mua in the mua, muau. Wow, lava. Amen. Well, I think I'll just proclaim what we have gotten from the ends of the earth, and then I'll be done, okay? Please turn with me to Psalm 24. Now, what the Lord has been giving us is that there is a new generation that God is raising up. And it is indeed unlike any other generation that has ever come before. Now, here, everyone is talking about the Joshua generation. Where we come from, what God has given us is the Jacob generation. Now, is there any difference? No, because they are both messages. And this new generation that God is rising up, it cannot be compared to just one generation, because it is greater than anything that God has ever done before. So this is the message that God has given us at the ends of the earth, and this is what we are focusing on now. Psalm 24 is one of my favorite psalms. If we could please turn to verse 6. According to the New King James Version, this is what verse 6 says. This is Jacob, the generation of those who seek him, who seek your face. That's why I was quite surprised in a happy way to see everyone wearing t-shirts with the scripture on it, because it just shows that God is raising up this generation. Okay? So this is the scriptural basis for this generation that we are talking about in the ends of the earth, the Jacob generation. And what is the primary focus of the Jacob generation? To seek the face of God. There are many goals. There are many things that we can wish for. But what is the greatest? Let's say you're in your own nation. What do you want? Would you like everyone to come to know the Lord? Everyone to be saved? Let's go above that. Would you like all of creation to be redeemed? Let's go above that. How about the whole world? How about more than that? What about the host of the heavens? The godly princes coming and taking their rightful places upon the earth. Let's go above that. All of us coming to the next life, going before the Lord. What is the greatest thing above attaining blessings, wealth, above what we were created for, above creation itself? What is there? What is the highest thing man can achieve? It is to seek the face of God. To seek the face of God is the highest honor and privilege anyone can attain to. Anyone. And I'm not just talking about in a vision, oh, I saw God. No. What we were created for. Face to face. In the beginning, God made man. Man was created for face-to-face fellowship with God. You know, when God first molded the earth, when he was making Adam, and he molded the earth and he put his mouth to Adam's, and his face was upon the face of man, and he breathed the breath of life. When man first woke up, do you know the first thing, the first human being ever saw? It was the face of God. The first thing mankind ever saw was the face of God. We were created to see the face of God, to be like him, to walk with him in the cool of the day, to fellowship with God. That's all we were made for. But of course we fell. We fell from glory and we lost that privilege. But by Jesus Christ, the Son of God, we have been redeemed. And we can again seek the face of God like never before. That is what we were created for, and that is what we will be redeemed to. Face to face fellowship with our Creator. So, that is what this generation is about. The Jacob generation, the message we are getting from the ends of the earth, is simply the generation that seeks after the face of God. Now, my second question, when I was always reading through this before God gave us revelation, I thought, why on earth is the name Jacob there? I thought, surely one of God's greater friends would be far more better than here. Surely it would be better to say, this is Moses, God's friend, the man who talked face to face with God. Surely it would be better to say, this is Moses, the generation. Or better to say, this is Joshua, the generation. Because Joshua saw God as the commander of the armies. Or Abraham, the great man himself, the father of the nations. I thought perhaps he would be the best suited to this task, to this title. Why Jacob? Why? And as I began to think back, I thought about all the messages, every single message I've heard on Jacob. And you know what I realized? The church doesn't really like Jacob. Seriously, I was listening. I remember listening to all the messages I've heard about Jacob. This is me personally. And a lot of messages about Jacob are, don't be like him. Don't be like that conniving, cheeky young man. The one who ripped off his brother, lied to his father, cheated his uncle. Don't be like that man. And me coming from that background, looking at this, I thought, so why is his name here? If his name is in this, and that is all that Jacob was, a supplanter, a stealer, a cheater, if that is all he was, then why is his name here? Why is God mentioned as the God of Jacob? And why is this nation named after him? there must be more. I thought to myself, there must be more to Jacob. There must be. And so God revealed to us. He took us back to the story of Jacob. And in the story of Jacob, you'll find why God loved this man and why his name is on the name of the generation of those who seek the face of God. You all know the story. Son of Isaac, brother to Esau. He cheated his brother out of his birthright. He took from his brother. But I thought, so what was the reason behind it? You see, man can judge. We can judge everyone's actions. When we see someone do something, we can judge. But only God knows the heart. Only God knows the heart. Even angels cannot read our hearts. You know that? It says in the book of Job, the angels of God mistook Lucifer for one of them. They could not see his inside. Only God could pick him out. Only God can see into the heart of man. And it is the same in this case. In the story of Jacob, only God could see his heart. And while the rest of us perhaps judge him, perhaps called him a cheater and a liar, only God saw that his heart was to seek the face of God. His brother was a good hunter. His brother was quite hairy. His brother was probably a good-looking guy, pretty strong, fit, good with a bow. And it says he was a mild-mannered man who liked dwelling in tents. But I think that word mild, they say it also means a centered, a focused person. And with this man, he was focused not on getting game, not on hunting, but on one thing. He wanted to seek the face of God. If you were there for Pastor George and Adorai's sharing, you would have heard that he was talking about stories. That Gideon must have grown up with stories, hearing of the past. It is the same with Jacob. He would have heard stories of how his father had followed his grandfather and how his grandfather had seen God, how his grandfather had heard from God to move, how his grandfather was a friend of God, how God had promised so much blessings to his grandfather. And you know what this young man said? That's not enough. For me, it's not enough. Hearsay is not enough. Another person's story is not enough. Someone else's report is not enough. I want to see him for myself. I want to see him for myself. And he had this decision in him. He had this goal that with everything within him, he would go after the face of God. If you look at Psalm 27, David himself says, when God says to him, you said to me, seek my face. And David says, my heart says, your face, Lord, I will seek. So if God calls us to seek his face, what part must respond? The heart. The heart is the part that turns towards God. The heart is the part where the decision is made. I want to see the face of God. And that is the part that God sees. For only God can see it. The heart is very important. And so for Jacob, his heart was simply like that. And you understand that even in the Psalm, David was claiming to be a part of this generation. He said, this is the generation. So it isn't a generation by time, I think. I think this is a generation by heart lines. It can stream from one to the next. Whoever's heart is willing to seek after the face of God, that alone, they are part of the generation. Okay? So, this is what happened. Jacob decided the stories were not enough. Hearsay was not enough. His grandfather and his father's experiences are not enough for him. So his heart decides, I will seek after this God of my grandfather, and I will see him for myself. And then the next logical question comes, well, how can I do that? Is he on a mountain that I can go climb to find him? Is he with someone that I can go see? And so he starts to think, how can I get at God? And I believe he arrives at this conclusion. Every gift that God has given to everyone he knows, he'll take them. He'll take them. Even if that means disrespecting his parents, going against his siblings, his family, he's going to take from them. And so that's what he does. That's what he does. He takes from his brother. He lies to his father. In every culture, not just ours, but in every culture, we are taught to respect our elders, especially our parents. So what are we doing here? What is part of this generation? The message is this. If it has, count the cost. If you must break your culture to seek the face of God, do it. If you must break everything you know to seek the face of God, do it. This man went against everything. His grandfather did it the right way. His father followed in his grandfather's footsteps. And this young man shoots off in another direction. Why? Because he wasn't willing to follow the crowd. He wasn't willing. Just as he wanted to see God for himself, he wanted to do things any way possible to seek the face of God. So because he had a heart like that was after God's own heart before anyone else, to seek the face of God for himself before anyone else, he acted in such a way. And when you understand the heart of Jacob, perhaps we see that some of our ideas or judgments about him are wrong as well. So this is what he does. He goes after his brother, takes his brother's birthright. He inherently becomes the firstborn. He runs away from his brother. His mother sends him to his uncle. He stays with his uncle. His uncle tries and rips him off too. But in the end, he takes his uncle's inheritance as well. And he comes with 2 wives. He has a long life. It is a hard life. It is a life of struggle. But he gives his all, his strength, his time to seek God. He spent 7 years for each wife serving his uncle, shepherding the flocks. He must have gone through so much, and yet deep beneath everything in his heart, he just wanted to seek the face of God. And I tell you, when we first began to hear about this man, I was not much impressed. But when the revelation came that this is what Jacob was like, then our hearts went out to him. And we realized we want to be like this man. We want to be like the man that even David himself wanted to be like. We wanted to be part of this movement, this generation that seeks after the face of God. And we are willing to count any cost. No cost is too dear. We are willing to give our all to see God. Because that's what we were created for. That's what we were made for. And that's what we are being redeemed to. So this man, I have much respect for this man now. Even before the time of Jesus, the time when God became flesh, this man was already wanting to seek after the face of God. He wanted to do it. And so he did it. And after all his hard years with his uncle and his uncle chasing him and then finally catching up and then them making peace and then his uncle going on his way and then him going back to his land, he has had a long life. He has He now has a family. He now has flocks. God has blessed him. He does have the blessing of Abraham, his grandfather. And now he's going back to his land. All along, wanting one thing, to see the face of God. From the time when he was young, from the time when he ripped off his brother, from the time he ran away, until the time he came back. That's all his heart desired. So finally he comes back home. And he sends messengers to his brother. And he says, go tell my brother I'm coming. We'll see what he says. The messengers come back, and instead of saying, oh, your brother says, yeah, peace be to you, come. The messengers come back and they say, hey, we told your brother and he's coming with 300 men. You can just imagine Jacob's heart, doom, 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 doom. He started to shake. And that's when he turns to God and he says, Lord, you told me to come back. You told me to come back. And so his mind is preoccupied with his brother thinking, man, this could be it. This could be it. And that's why he divides the flocks up to send as gifts these things. I'll try and make my brother happy. I'll give him all that I have. So he sends one flock, then another flock, and another flock, and another flock with messages. These are presents for my Lord Esau. And it says in Genesis 32, it says there that he arranges even his children. And then he crosses over the ford Jabbok to send them on their way. And then night comes. And scripture says, and he is left alone. And in this time of loneliness and darkness, a man comes. A man comes. And he wrestles with Jacob. Throughout the night, they wrestle. There's no one there. They are alone. Jacob wrestled with God. We know the earthly story, but let's look at it from a heavenly perspective, okay? God has hardly ever had to interfere in earth. Okay? God has hardly ever had to interfere. There are only a few times where God has had to personally come down and say, things are in such an extreme state that I myself have to come and do something. Okay? One of those was the Tower of Babel. He said, the earth is in such a state, these guys are so one-minded. They are all together building this tower. They are so powerful, nothing on heaven or on earth can stop them. So that was one time God said, I have to intervene myself. I have to come down. Another time was when, because we lost the glory of God, because we lost our way to God and we needed salvation. So God had to intervene. God himself had to come in flesh, in person, to give his life for us so that we might be saved and have a way back to the Father and to the face of God. But you'll notice with all these situations, they were global situations, worldwide situations. And yet with this thing, in this case, the same thing, the situation became so extreme. Jacob had taken everything from everyone around him. It had become so extreme that God in heaven looked down and said, if I do not come down and stop this boy, he will take over the world. There have been global situations where God has had to intervene. But there has only been one where one man has caused God to interfere. That was this time. Jacob stirred up such a situation that God himself said, I have to come and stop this boy. I have to come and wrestle with him because there is no one left. The boy has gone through everything. This man, Jacob, has gone through everything to see my face. And so in the midst of this turmoil on the ground, Jacob worrying about his brother coming to get him, the coming day, and things looking pretty bleak, God himself interferes. God comes on the scene. And he looks at Jacob and he says, we have an appointment. And they wrestle. Part of, we're talking about new generations, fit young generations. And this is part of it. We have to be strong. We have to be fit. Wrestling is the most extreme sport. Do you know that? Wrestling is the most extreme sport because you use every muscle in your body. Every muscle in your body has to be used to try and outdo your opponent. Okay? And we're not just talking about a bout for a few minutes. We're talking about a wrestling match through the night. And now you know why God loved this boy. Loved this man Jacob. Because he got closer to the face of God than any other living man. His grandfather, his father, whoever saw God, even Moses, when they saw the face of God, they talked face to face, yes. But they did the right thing. They bowed down. They stayed their distance. They did the honorable thing. If God came here in person, what would you do? We would be on our faces. And yet when God comes down in flesh and appears in man's form before this little guy, what does he do? Come on, God, let's wrestle. Come on, God, let's go for it. I'll even take you on. I'll take on everyone around me. I'll take on my family. And I'll even take you on just to see your face. Just to see your face. That's the heart he had. Even if I get killed in the process, as long as I see the face of God, I will die a happy man. Do you have that heart? That attitude? Do you? That is the attitude that even David longed for. That's why when David made that psalm, he said, this is Jacob. I have the same heart. I'm seeking your face with my best, with my strength, with everything I have. And it is the same with Jacob. And that is why God loved Jacob. Because no other human being got so close. No other man tasted the sweat of God. No other man breathed the same breath of God as they were wrestling. And no one can defeat God, yes? Even in physical form. No one can defeat God. And yet this little boy, he still wanted to go. And so what does God do? You know the story? God touches the hip, shrinks the muscle, boom. Now, if you know anything about martial arts, what do they say? All power comes from the hips. Even in boxing, power comes from the hips. All power comes from the hips. So it is very logical. If you want to undo someone, your competitor, go for the part where the power comes from. So of course, what does the Lord do? He takes out the hip, boom. And now he's only on one leg. And he can't wrestle because, you need your whole body to wrestle. You need your whole body to throw your opponent down, keep him down, wrestle him, hold him in the dust, in the dirt, sweat to sweat, breath to breath. And yet, it comes to the point where Jacob is now lying on the ground because he's disabled. And God, of course, cannot be defeated physically. He cannot be defeated in any way. And yet he looks down at Jacob. And what does he see? This man holding on to one leg. And God says, the sun's about to arise. Let me go. The guy's on the ground holding God. He won't let him move. And what does Jacob say? Not until you bless me. Not until you bless me. This man was so sold out for the purpose of seeking the face of God that even when God told him, I've had enough, I want to go, he said, no, you stay. That is the attitude we must have. Christians are not perfect right now. Christians do make mistakes. But we must have the attitude that we should hold on. Hold on. When God says, I've had enough, I want to leave you, you hold on. When you are disabled and you have nothing, hold on. Hold on. Hold on. And the Lord looks down and sees this man covered in dirt, full of sweat. They've been wrestling all night. One of his hips is out, and the man is still holding on. The man still holds on. And he sees the heart of Jacob, and he's overwhelmed. The Lord is overwhelmed. Jacob changes God's mind. Jacob changed God's mind. And so God blesses him. God says, what is your name? He says, my name's Jacob. Yaakov. He says, you shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have struggled with men and with God and have prevailed. Let's think about that. God just admitted to this guy on the ground that he's prevailed over him. Okay? Now, something's wrong. You know, in mankind, when we have this idea of prevailing or defeating, we have this idea of the guy on the ground and you on top. Okay? That's prevailing. The guy on the ground. And yet, this guy's lying on the ground. God's on top. And God says to him, you have prevailed against me. So what is God's idea of prevailing? It is not man's idea of prevailing. Man's idea of prevailing is man on top. God's idea of prevailing is never letting go. Never letting go. If you want to prevail against God, do not let go. That is the message. And so this man was blessed. The only one who wrestled with God. The only one who not only saw his face, but felt his face. Who tasted the sweat of God, who wrestled with him all night, and who God blessed. And because of that, this man was blessed for the rest of his life. God looked up with favor upon this man. Read the book. One of his sons became like the vice president, okay? He became second in command to Pharaoh. This man became blessed. And another thing, this also links to the hearts of the fathers turning to the children and the hearts of the children turning to the fathers. Why? Because everything else falls into place when you see the face of God. Whatever problems or things you have on your mind, they disappear when you see the face of God. When God finally, this guy just always wanted more. I mean, God's blessed him, right? He's on the ground. And then what does Jacob say? Tell me your name, I pray. This young fellow was always wanting more. He wanted more. And, that's why God said, why are you asking for my name? In other words, hey, that's enough. You're asking too much now. So God leaves. And as the sun rises, Jacob limps on his hip and goes to meet his brother. And the following day, he was afraid of his brother. He had sent the flocks to try and appease his brother. And this day, he still knows. He knows his brother's coming with 300 men. But he's on the top of the world. I've wrestled with God. He's more weak than he could have ever been. He can't fight. He can't defend his family. And this guy is just happy. He's fulfilled his life's desire. His life's goal has just been fulfilled. And so as he goes to meet his brother comes. And as his brother comes, he bows down. And you know the story. They have a beautiful reunion. Brother to brother. what was broken was mended. And the day before, he had sent the flocks to try and as gifts to try and appease his brother. And then now he's so happy, his brother says to him, I don't need these gifts. Take them with you. I'm fine. I've got everything. And what does Jacob say? No, please take them, brother, because seeing your face, it makes me just as happy as if I have seen the face of God. It's in there. In other words, he was still so high from that night before. And he said, you know, brother, take them. My goal is complete. I can die a happy man now. And even the hearts of the fathers towards the children, when you seek after the face of God, that falls into place. Think about his grandfather Abraham. He had sons, Ishmael, Isaac. What happened? Only 2 sons? Oh, well, he had other sons, of course. But 2 sons, and they split, and they fight. They war against one another. His father, Isaac, Esau and Jacob. 2 brothers, same mother, same father, split, fighting. But this man, Jacob, he has 12 sons, 1 daughter, by 4 different women. And these guys, they are brothers. They are strong. They come from different wombs, and yet they are full brothers. Do you see the difference? With his fathers, they didn't see the face of God like he saw it. So their children as well, they parted. But his children stayed together, close. And so this man became blessed. The nation of Israel is still here today. And that comes from his loins. This man was so blessed and so loved by God. If you read when he died, when he passed away, of course, him and his brothers were brought to Egypt. And their brother Joseph looked after them. If you read it, it says when he died, the Egyptian mummifiers, they came and mummified him, which is like the honors for the kings. They honored this guy like a king. And they said even the house of Pharaoh wept for him. And they said that before he died, he said, I want to be buried back in my own land. So they took him back. And not only the family went back to bury their father Jacob. If you read it. The whole house of Pharaoh, the royal house of the number 1 superpower at the time, went into this little wilderness desert to bury a stranger. God's friend, God's wrestling partner. And they came, and the armies of Egypt came, and their generals, and they mourned him. It'd be the same today if someone from some country somewhere died in America, and the whole United States of America and all the Western powers decide to have a solemn day of remembrance and a state funeral for a guy that no one knows. And we really feel that that's